Hello and welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we teach you how to use Oracle Cloud, its products and services. We should have a quick poll on the screen. Nick, if you would have the poll displayed, please. There you go. So this poll is just to get an understanding of everyone's level of experience with cloud and Oracle Cloud infrastructure. This helps us in designing our content for the upcoming session. So would really appreciate if you would take a second and respond to the poll. The session is being recorded and you'll be able to find the recording on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forum for customers and end users. You can also find the recordings and slide deck PDFs of our previous sessions there. I'm Renu Bhatt, a TPM with the Customer Enablement team. And today I'm joined by Anand Prasad, Cloud Architect, and Larry Busile, Senior Manager, Technical Program Management here at Oracle. We will be covering business operations on Oracle Cloud in this session. Like always, a quick reminder to use the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen for any questions throughout the session. And questions put in chat, I'll ask you to move over to Q&A box because that's where people are going to look to answer questions. With that, I would like to hand it over to Larry and Anand.
Awesome. Thanks, Renu. Welcome, everybody, and looking forward to having a great conversation today and talking about cloud operations. Anand, are you excited about business ops?
Yes, Larry, let's get started.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we're going to kick it off. So quick agenda. So what are we talking about today for business operations? We're going to focus on compartments, tagging, cost budget analysis, cloud advisor, and some key takeaways from all of this. And something to just kind of keep in mind as we go through this journey. Like, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. We'll definitely try our best to answer those as we can as we go through, and we'll definitely keep some time towards the end to answer some of those questions. And in today's journey, we're going to hop in the console and do some demonstrations, kind of talk about it, and show you what it looks like. I think one of the things that I kind of get excited about when we talk about business operations is, how do we actually organize things in the account? When it comes to the cost and budget, that's definitely something that is necessary, and it's something that you want to make sure your accounting teams are happy and have the information they need. But when we look at this, how do we make sure we can control some of that cost? And that's definitely something that we're going to discuss today as we go through this journey. So this piece here, so what's the responsibility, as a customer? What do you have to consider when you're looking at going to the cloud or just being in the cloud from a business perspective? Well, one of the things that you are, everybody may have heard or seen or, heard rumors of, but you're kind of trading your cost, so that you don't have to worry about your data center. You're putting that onto the cloud, and so you actually have essentially like a power bill kind of cost when you look at this. And so that's something that when it scares a lot of account teams, because they're like, how do we budget for this? How do we make sure that things are planned out, things are organized? And that's definitely something that we're going to get into and talk about today when we look at what the responsibility model is. As Oracle, we're definitely taking care of like the underlying infrastructure from a compliance and security standpoint. And then you're managing your data, you're managing your user access, and it gets a little bit easier depending on which services you deploy. So it's just a matter of, what do you want to use? And this is something that we'll definitely dive a little bit further into today. Now, when we look at the Oracle Cloud ecosystem, if you've been on this journey with us for a couple of sessions now or seen some of our previous talks, we talk about the fact that we have multiple services, we have multiple features, multiple options that we can definitely dive into. And this again can be something that, hey, if we launch the wrong thing, and this is something like Anand, if we launch the wrong thing, what could happen?
I think you have a chance to take a look at it and figure it out from your cloud console what are the services running, and then I think take necessary actions based on that. That's what I think we talk about it in the later part of the session about how do you identify what resources you need and how can you manage those resources, whether they are relevant or not relevant to what you're plan to use it. And that's where I think you can get a view about from a cost perspective, from a budget perspective, or even from the coder perspective, whether you want to control certain resources not to be even spun up in the OCI tenancy.
Yeah, and that's the last piece you brought up, that quota piece. That's, I think, going to be a huge benefit when we talk about business ops, because it's something that, everybody's like, hey, we're going to the cloud. What do we have to think about? And we have to think about how do we put in place just some guardrails. It's not blocking so you can't do something. It's putting some guardrails so that things don't go out of hand or go crazy, because you can launch a lot of resources when you first get into your account. But these are some considerations that you have to make when you first build out a tenancy of, do we want to launch the largest bare metal instance right away? Maybe not. Maybe that is our requirement. And so, yes, we want to launch that, but it's having some of those checks in place so that we make sure that what we're launching meets the requirement for our application. And again, when we talk about kind of a business operations and budget and all this, we have to make sure it doesn't meet the $ requirement. Do we have unlimited budget to launch everything we possibly can or want to? That would be awesome, because then you can just you have this massive playground and you create whatever you want. But in most cases, when you come into the console, you're going to probably have some guardrails and say, okay, this is what we want to focus on. We're launching this particular Exadata, or we're launching this particular compute instance. Maybe we're using cloud native features and focusing on functions, maybe API calls. And so we still have to put potentially some guardrails in place for the ecosystem to make sure, hey, we have a budget of $20,000 a month for this application. So we want to set those parameters so that we know when we're hitting those budgets. And we're definitely going to talk about that more today. So, all right. So we got an example here, and Anand, as we kind of go through this, since you're, kind of the head of Vision Corp, recently did a lift and shift where you migrated your legacy application to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. How can we efficiently manage the cost for cloud hosting to achieve the goals? What are some things that we can think about here to kind of achieve a goal of reducing our cost or just effectively managing our costs here?
Something which comes into my mind is when I started to migrate the things from my on-prem world to the cloud. In the on-prem world, I had the control about everything, which I need to buy it from the forecast it, everything. And I want to have a similar type of things, like, when I move into the cloud, what is my cost monthly? Like, how much my resources have been burned? Like, when I deploy an application, now what is the resource it is consuming? How can I track it? And whether it is being used in the dev resources or a prod resources, like, how can I filter it very quickly using a search key item? And then I want to make sure that I figure it out, like, this is the cost it is, like I need to owe for the cloud at the Oracle side every month. So I need some capabilities in the OCI so that I can quickly search on it. So, and that leads to two interesting topics, which I think you can lay it out in these compartments and tagging. And of course, the budget encoders is the guardrails, which you earlier figured it out. That's the view I'm looking at from a, like, migration from lift and shift from on-prem to cloud. Like, cloud is new to me, and I want to make sure my costs do not run over, and I quickly get about what I'm spending on in a single pane of window.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I know you probably have, and I definitely have talked to customers. So like, hey, we started our tenancy and we launched, and then we got our first bill, and we're like, hang on a second, we didn't want to launch some of those resources, or we thought we needed to launch larger resources. And so this is something that, getting into this a little bit ahead of time and talking about like the cloud adoption framework and some of the prereqs before going into it can be very beneficial. So as we kind of look at the the previous slide here, where we're trying to manage our costs and be as efficient as possible, this definitely gets into a couple pieces you're bringing up there, talking about compartments, tagging, budget, and quota. And this is going to be kind of the focus as we continue through this journey. And one thing that I just want to hit on is compartments and tagging. These should be some big conversations early on in this journey. These should be some of the conversations of what is a compartment. Well, a compartment is a logical isolation of your resources, and what benefit. We're going to talk a little bit more about what benefit that gives us as we kind of get down into some of these slides a little bit more before we pop into the console. From a tagging perspective, we have a lot of ways that we can actually implement our tagging into the account. And this is something that is going to be crucial. Are we doing predefined tags? Are we doing free-form tags, which you can, but may not be best practice? And then budget and quota. What quotas are we putting on the tenancy level, which is going to be your account, and what quota are we going to put on the specific compartments as we dive down this? All right, so let's talk about compartments. So if you haven't seen it, compartments, like I said, are a logical isolation of resources. So when you first launch your account, you're going to actually see your root compartment. Your root compartment is going to house a lot of different components when it comes to global certain services that are global constructs. And then this is also where you're going to have your identity and access management admins. And this is something that they can administer the entire account. And when we look at that, you're going to want a couple admins for every account. So that way, in case of emergency, break glass here kind of situation. In the admin group, just kind of a side piece from the security talks we've done, you do have to have an admin in the admin group at all times. It's not something that you can go in there and delete every single user in that group. So that kind of helps keep some of those protections in place. But compartments are going to have all of these resources. So when we look at these collection of resources and these collection of compartments, this is something that we have specific policies associated with different compartments. We're going to have different users associated with accessing different compartments. So this goes into two kind of main things: isolating your resources from a cost analysis piece later, and from a security piece, so that we can actually have information security. So if you have a SOC, if you have a network operations center, if you have certain services that are shared, all of these resources are going to be part of a logical isolation, so that we can say, oh, what user needs to access what at what time. And now what you see on the screen is kind of how we've built our fictitious company of Vision Corp, but this is kind of an example of how some companies potentially do this. And this is going to be a kind of a discussion for what are you trying to do? So which way do you go? So this is something that, as we kind of progress through, you'll see inside of this particular slide deck. One second, go back one. Here we go. So these are going to be our policies that are associated, and these are basically compartments in this particular case. And then as we progress through, like I said, we're going to have different users being able to access different things. So we have our associated resources for infrastructure, and these are going to be something that other services can use or act upon with appropriate permission. So if we launch an instance here, this instance will be maybe in the public subnet. And so this is something that we know where it's going to be launched for the network components, but our compute components are going to be in the enterprise application. So this helps us isolate the resources and then come back later when we talk about cost and analysis and budgeting and all of those components. So Anand, as we look at this, any items that just kind of stand out and just as an overall benefit to, how do compartments benefit us?
I think from my view, I think compartments gives you two differentiating feature, like, benefits for the customers. Like, they can isolate the resources based on their business LOB functions. Like, one thing which they can then have a cross-charging capability, so that, okay, they can see that this compartment is using this amount of resources and this is the costing, so they can cross-charge. The other big benefit is, like, from a security perspective, you can create a compartment where you want to have a very confidential resources, then you can deploy it in there, and you can completely guard it using the security policies on that compartment, who has an access with the least privileges. That's one advantages which I see, that say from the security perspective and from a cost charging perspective for the customers.
Yeah, definitely good points there when we talk about cross charging and how to set this up. So, all right. So looking at compartments, this is actually probably a good segue to hop into the console, because I don't know about all of you. I like being in the console as much as I possibly can. It's the best way to learn. So when we're in the console, if you haven't seen this, this is what the OCI console looks like. I do have my Cloud Shell running at the bottom, so I'm just going to go ahead and minimize that. But what are compartments and where are they stored? Well, compartments, like we talked about, are logical isolation resources. So this means compartments are a global construct. With that said, it comes into play later when you have multiple regions. So it's something that I can put specific policies around these compartments to say, oh, I can only launch resources in that specific region. There's also other ways to kind of control or put some guardrails around it. So compartments are going to be found under identity, and in the newer, so you may see in your account, if it's created relatively recently, identity domains. And this is something that you'll see compartments under identity domains, or identity and security is where you would find your compartments. And then inside of here, every single compartment is going to have what's called an OCID, or an Oracle ID. And this comes into play when you're talking about policy implementation and or searching for the item. But like I said, compartments are a global construct. And if we go to specific resources like compute, for example, and I take a look at instances, this is one of the things you want to make sure that you're in the correct compartment when you're launching. So you'll notice that this is going to tell you instances, the root compartment, and then I have instances in here, and then I have maybe my specific demo compartment, and I have instances here. It's relatively easy to actually move resources around to different compartments. So if I click on one of these instances, I can actually move by going in here and click move resource, and I can move it if I wanted to the root level. Now, I have admin permission, so this would be something that this might be something you want to lock down depending on your architecture, depending on your design, so someone can't just randomly move a resource into another compartment. And you can definitely put some guardrails on that. A couple things to note when we are talking about compartments is how many levels can we go down? So if we have our parent compartment, we can have subcompartments under the root tenancy, and we can have child compartments. We can have up to 6 levels deep in a child compartment. And one of the things to note for policies or implementation there, policies are going to be at a hierarchical level. So if I have something at the parent compartment, it's going to trickle down to all the child compartments. So that's kind of what compartments look like, the fact that they are a global construct, and then you would have a collection of resources in each compartment. Anand, what else might be crucial about compartments as we kind of look through this? Any items that you can think of?
I think you covered pretty much. I think did you cover the 6th level down, Larry? You can go up to 6 levels, the child compartment. This also gives you an advantage of, for the folks who are managing the other customers or other departments, you can create at the top level, and you can go down 6 levels depending upon your needs. And then this gives you a lot more flexibility of using single tenancy, and then managing multiple customers for you. If you're in a business of like a partner services where you want to manage multiple customers on OCI, or in business units, you can manage that, or you can go down to 6 levels.
Yeah, and that definitely is helpful when you're talking about project control, and when you're talking about, hey, we have this dev, test, and prod. So we may have a parent compartment that is for that particular application, and then we have dev, test, and prod compartments under that particular parent compartment. And then you can have the cost pieces, the quota policies, all sorts of configurations in there. So, all right, continuing on to tagging. So tagging is definitely a crucial component when we get into this. Every resource can be tagged in some way, shape, or form. In these tags, we have a couple different options. So we have cost tracking tags, which one of the things to keep in mind is you do have a maximum amount of 10 for cost tracking tags, but those can be, you can have multiple values associated with those cost tracking tags. So it's definitely something that you can get as granular as you need to when you get into tagging. Tags are metadata that are attached to your resources. So this is something that is going to provide you information of maybe who created what at what time, because we do have some defined tags with variables. So you can actually enforce tagging in a compartment or in a tenancy, and then basically say, I want to know what is created, when it was created on, and then you also want to enforce, what environment is this for? Is this dev? Is this prod? Or cost tracking? Who does it need to be charged to at the end of the day for the application? So that's a lot of what tagging is going to be helpful for. So our tagging options, we have free form. So when we get into the console, we can take a look at this. We have defined tags, and then we have cost tracking and with defined tags, and then tag namespace. So a tag namespace is going to be a group of tag key definitions. And this is something that when you do look in the console, you'll actually see kind of Oracle defined tags that you can utilize, or that you can start from scratch with, or you can kind of create your own. So that's some of the pieces with tagging, which we'll get into the console. But Anand, as we look through this on tags, for the company we talked about, why tagging plays a crucial role in managing resources, and can we add tags to already created resources?
Definitely. I think there is 2 things which I think tagging, since I was interested in moving the resources from an on-prem world into the cloud, and when I moved in a lift and shift application, which we talked about it in the earlier, the couple of things which comes into me for the tagging is when I tag the resources, whether it's like, defined tags, which I highly recommend people to use a defined tags. I can see that whether it is dev resources, or it's a prod resources, or it is like, used for like, test resources. So based on that, I can take certain actions, like, whether to keep it running 24/7, or it is to bring it down. That's one benefit of the defined tags. The second thing is also, I want to see what is the, it's costing me to keep this lights on for this production application, which is, I think, the cost tagging, which you talked about, Larry, gives you that advantages of attaching the cost tracking to the prod applications, gives you a view about from the cost angle using by search with that tag, and you can clearly see how much you're burning for that particular application. So those are the 2 big advantages, which I think when I migrated from an on-prem world to the cloud, I use the tagging for those 2 purposes. And of course, you can showcase how, if you missed it, you can again come back and tag it. I think I'm pretty sure you're leading into that question right now. If you missed the tagging earlier, how can you tag already deployed resources?
Yeah, definitely. Because that's something that I've worked with I can't count how many customers at this point, but I've worked with a lot of customers that tagging is not something that's a top priority. And then you get a bunch of resources deployed and you're like, oh, we need to tag our resources. So it's definitely something that we can take a look at. And I'm going to go through that in the console. So a couple of things to keep in mind for tagging is we do have some specific policies that will need to be implemented so that people have access to use tags or access to deploy tags, or they have access to only resources that are tagged in a specific way. So we can allow the dev budget group to use tag namespace and tenancy where target tag namespace equals development. So we can be very granular in what we're trying to do or who has access to what and what they're able to actually deploy. All right, so automating tagging. So this is one of the biggest pieces that will help out so that you don't have to go back and define or go back and implement tags retroactively. Now, this is from a point in time forward. So when I talk about having to go back retroactively, if you implement this today and you have resources that are in your account currently, they will not be tagged unless you go back and tag those resources. So from this point in time forward, those resources will be tagged if this is implemented. So a tagging variable, so we can say, who created what at what time, and then we can enforce this through the actual tenancy and say so there's some other variables that you can actually pull in, but we can have date time, principal type, and IAM principal name, which would be the name of the user that potentially created it. And this can come into play when you actually run reports. So oh, this person sits in this organization, so we need to do a cross charge potentially back to that organization. So that's some of the benefits for having tagging automation. And then you just know, okay, when was it created? So when we look at tagging and kind of diving a little bit deeper into compartments, we can have tagging at the tenancy level and tagging enforced at the compartment level inside of the account. So some of the key pieces here for kind of organizing. So these are organizational tools that we want to look at, which is compartments. So as it says, best used for setting permission boundaries. Tags are going to be best used for basically cost attribution, or it's looking at adding policies to who can access what at what time. Now we can do that in both sides. We can have cost attribution from a compartment standpoint, and we can add tags so that we can be a little bit more granular into the resources that get deployed. Compartments are going to be global, and this is going to be something that the resources themselves are going to be regional constructs, like compute, some database services, certain things that you deploy will be regional constructs or availability domain constructs. And so that's something to keep in mind, that those are going to be separate from what the compartment actually is. And when we get into tags, this is something that tags are going to allow us to have a little bit of group defined tags, and this will give us some control into who can do what based on those tags. So if it's dev, test, or prod, maybe we say in our IAM policy that we can give full access to everything, where in a condition statement we're not equal to prod tag. So that way you can't modify or do something on prod. So some best practices for tagging: use defined tags, create tag definitions for everything you want to be able to search. Now you can search everything in the account. This is just something that it makes it easier when you create tags. One thing that I get asked a lot, are tags case sensitive? And tags are case sensitive when it comes to the key value portion. So something to keep in mind as you kind of go through your tagging schema. Use tag defaults and tag variables, and then put all your tag namespaces at the top of the tree you expect to use it in. So some good best practices to keep in mind as we go through tagging. With that said, let's go ahead and pop into the console to see what it looks like to tag. And then after this, Anand's going to take us through some more journey on budget and cost analysis and some deeper dives in those areas. So inside of our account, if we go to identity and access management, we got our compartment. So that's one of the things that we might want. So keep just something to keep in mind. I'm going to go ahead and put a push pin so it goes to my home page. And then if we look at governance and administration, we have our tag namespace. So I'm going to go ahead and put a push pin on that. What that does for me is when I go to my home page, now I have my tag namespace here and it's pinned to my home page. So if I need to find it again, I can. When I click on tag namespace, this is actually going to drop me into whatever compartment I was in last. So since I was in Larry demo, it's going to drop me down there. And so like we talked about, a tag namespace is going to be a group of basically key value pairs. So if we look at an example here, we have Oracle Standard, and then we have cost center, critical, end user count, environment org. So we have a couple of kind of Oracle Standard or Oracle tags in this account. And the Oracle tags that we've created here, these are actually this is our namespace. And then we have a couple of, created by and created on. And so this would be the first steps for creating kind of our variable or our automatic tagging. So if we actually take a look at created by, this is all this tag is giving us. So the description, the name of the principal who created the resource. This is a cost tracking tag, and this is going to be a string in this particular case. So let's take a look at creating one of these, and it would be, here's our key. And this is something, spaces and periods are not allowed, but this is going to have something that is, if I try to do created on, and we'll just add test here, make sure the description is clear for what you're trying to do. And static value, so this is, user enters a string value for this key or a list of values. And this list of values, we can just basically do like this. So as you see here, I'm just adding multiple lines and then I can create this. So this is why this is crucial. So this key already exists. So I cannot create another key with that particular name because I already have created on. So something to keep in mind. Now I can create multiple values for this. And then when I go to add it to a resource, I can only add one key. In this case, I could only add created on with a specific value once. So if I need to have multiple pieces here, I would need to have multiple types of key value pairs for what I'm trying to do. When I pop over to compartments, so now that we have our key value, our namespace and everything defined, the next piece that we would need to do is look at, okay, how do we want to enforce this? And so this is something that we have our tagging default. And to create a tagging default, I would say, okay, what namespace are we using? In this case, we're using Oracle tags. We're going to use created by, and then we can have the user applied value or the default value. And the default value, this is where we can actually add that variable. So let me show you what that actually looks like, because I do have that in a higher level compartment. Because for that one, that should be something that's actually applied at the root tenancy level as opposed to a lower compartment. And so we have the created by and created on, and so we have the default variable. So what this is going to apply, if we look at a resource that's actually created inside of this tenancy, go to one of these and go over to the tags. This is going to say who created it and who created it on. So it's going to apply that to every single resource that gets launched in this tenancy. And it doesn't matter if it's a subcompartment, because if we go to instances and even drop down to my compartment and then look at one of my instances and go to tags, this is going to have created on and created by, and then an environmental variable for this particular resource, along with freeform tag. And that's where one of the reasons that I have this open here. So when we talk about tagging, and I know I'm spending a little too much time on this piece, if you've launched resources in the account already, this is something that we do have a way to actually add tags. So we do have a script that you can retroly add tags to your particular resources. So I'm going to drop this in here. This is on our GitHub repository, and this allows you to run this in the CLI or locally once you have your CLI configured, but you can run it in the Cloud Shell here, and then we can go and basically retroactively tag our resources. And so an example of this, or example command, I can run this command here, which would be Python 3, the Python script, list, and I can actually list all of the resources that are inside of the tenancy. I can do this based on tags. I can do this based on what's going on in here, specific tags, or if it doesn't have a tag, so that I can go back and fix this. So this is giving me, oh, I have some object storage. I have a lot of different resources here with particular OCIDs and particular tags that are created. So this is giving me, in this case, action list and basically everything that's inside of my tenancy. So this can be beneficial to look at what's going on inside of your account, or you can actually tag. So I'll show you the tagging command real quick. And you can also delete, basically bulk delete tags if you have the permission to do so. So this is something that I do need to fix the tag namespace because I was doing kind of a test here, but this is an example command as well, where you can do action, add defined, tag namespace, key value, which compartment, and then what region. The -DT is actually to run it when you're in the Cloud Shell. So, but this will help you if you haven't started tagging. But with that said, I'm gonna go back to the slide deck and then hand it over to Anand to take us through some more components around budget and alerting and cost analysis.
Thank you, Larry. I think cost and budget is always an interesting topic. I think I wish that everybody has infinite resources as well as cost to spend on any of the resources, whether it's on-prem or cloud. But it's always an interesting topic because everybody is given a certain budget and you need to live within that budget. Now, with that, what is OCI budgeting? For example, in how do you track cost? How do you forecast how much you need to host your workloads in OCI? So the OCI budgeting provides you a view about how to visualize what is your your workloads cost today and how much does it cost in probably forecasted cost for next 12 months. Okay, and then when the burn rate starts, when do you want to get notified, whether you want to get notified at 50% of the budget utilized or 75% of the budget utilized? How do you set alerts on your budget already set? For example, I'll give you an example. Initially, we think about hosting a couple of VMs satisfies our applications, and you spin up those VMs and you're set to go. But what happens if somebody comes and spins up a test VMs or some sort of a dev VMs which you didn't anticipate, and automatically it starts consuming the budget, but you want to get notified on it. So that it's very, very important to set some alerts saying that if my budget burn rate is 50%, when it burns, it just notify me so I can go ahead and see whether my burn is actually happening for the right resources as well, right? Now, you can also see from a dashboard, which I'm going to showcase, how is all the budgets from set it basically from based on cost centers and all those things. This leads to the next slide, which I think Larry alluded into. How can you filter based on whether you want to do the cost analysis based on tax, which we talked about it earlier, like, tax gives you a lot of power for you to go and filter it on based on certain tax, like, whether it is project-based tax, whether it is cost-based tax, or even just a tagging which you have applied it to your resources we deployed on OCI. That's one way of we can do the analysis on. The second way of doing the analysis is from, like, we talked about earlier, is the compartment-based. Like, can you group it, the resources based on a certain compartment or region or even availability domain, right? That's a little bigger picture, but I think you can still go and say that how much is my burn rate in Phoenix? Like, if you're running the workloads in Phoenix, or how much is my burn rate at region level in Ashburn for OCI, you can certainly do that. Or you can narrow it down to a particular compartment and says, what is my burn rate on the resources deployed inside this compartment? Last but the least, I think I went from right to left, is a filters. You can create filters so that you can do the filters based on availability, time, and granularity, and do the cost analysis as well. The cost analysis is very, very key, because there is a misnomer that cloud is cheap. And if you don't manage the cloud resources deployed and use the right actions at right appropriate time, you will burn out a lot of money on the cloud, irrespective of the cloud vendor you deploy in. Okay. Now, that is the reason I think OCI provides a lot of tools for you to take advantage of it, which I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. Next slide, Larry. So one of the key things is, we touched upon this in a very, very early part of the conversation, is quotas. Like, how do you create a guardrails? I'm going to show you in the console very quickly. How do you set a guardrails for your resources? For example, there are very, very, very expensive resources like Exadata, whether it's Exadata cloud server, it's a quarter rack, or like, half a rack. How do you make sure you do not simply spin it up and let it go without even managing it better and see whether the workloads have been deployed on it, right? You set a quotas, who can spin up what resources. You do not want in a dev compartment some of the very highly expensive resource to be spinned up, or some of you want to make sure very, very, for the dev instances, you don't want, like, very high power, high extensive compute resources. So you want to have, like, very less expensive resources in the dev compartments, like, and the same thing with testing. And then I think you can do all the bells and whistles in the production compartment. So you can lock it down in quota based on the usage of it. Say it's a dev usage, let me give them only a less number of resources in the quota, and they don't even have capabilities to spin up any other resources. So you can lock down the quota, saying that every other services they cannot spin it up except the very less expensive services. That gives you the guardrail. You can set it by compartments. The powerful what I call it, like a governance model, which gives you, the quota gives you is like, setting up the quotas to lock it down so that you manage the cost better. Anything I missed, Larry, on the quotas? You want to add it?
Not that I can think of, but I think based on our time, I think we should probably, I'm going to hand this over so you can pop into the console and kind of go into budget and some of the cost analysis pieces.
Okay. Then I think this is the quick, I'll speed through it. This is a quick example. How can you set a quota? If you can see the first line, 0 compute quotas in the tenancy. And then I say, like, I blank out the compute resources so that nobody can spin up. Then I say, allow only. It's just like a very common terminology, deny all, allow few, right? This is what I think I allow the few resources in it, right? Let me, next slide, Larry. I think I'll set it up for the, I think we can skip this very quickly, I think, in the interest of time. Cost reporting, budget, and quota strategies is like, optimizing your spending. Yeah, let me quickly jump into the console, and I can talk about the Cloud Advisor as well as this one, so that I think.
Go ahead, Anand. Anand, you there?
Yes. Can you see my screen?
No, not really.
No.
No.
There we go. Yep.
I clicked on something and I started getting a noise out of that window. So some Okay. So in the console, as Larry was talking about, right? So billing and cost management is one thing which I think you can take a look at it. Like in audio, manage the cost reports. You can set the budgets here. I'll go deeper into that. I'll just quickly run through the overview and then I'll deeper dive into this. How do you do the cost analysis? Like, and then the other one I think, which I think Larry already talked about, is the governance side of the fence, like, where the cloud advisor is one thing which you can also take a look at it, like, how we want to provide the recommendations. Let me dive into the budgets first and then come into the cost analysis, cost reports and everything, right? Now, in terms of budgets, right, you can quickly, very easy to create a budget. I've already created a budget. For an example here is like, my Vision Corp, which we were talking about, it is we created a budget of like 5,000 spend, right? And I'll quickly go into that budget, right? You can see that I am getting an alert notification on 80% when the actual spend happens, right? First, and then I also get 100% when it happens, right? You can create budget rules very quickly on a forecast spend or on an actual spend. Like sometimes, like, the OCI itself forecast based on your usage, like, maybe you forecasted only like, a couple of VMs per week, and now you're just enhanced number of VMs, and you start to burn more. And it says, okay, if this is the way they are going to use it in next 6 months to 12 months, what is the forecasted amount, and you'll burn out, right? The percentage of you can see the threshold of the percentage of the amount or absolute amount. You can play around with this based on your needs and set the threshold. Okay. Now, in terms of as soon as it happens, the trigger happens, you can set the email notification. You can also have the email messaging, what type of body you want to do it. Like, I've already reached the 50% of my quota, and this is the budget, and then take the appropriate actions, whether you want to go ahead and sneak preview into it, you're actually running the services which you intended initially, or there is other like, orphans, like, which nobody knows about it, already spun up in your OCI tenancy, and take a look at it and scan through it, etc. And that's where I think this tagging also plays a very crucial role, which I think Larry talked about it. You can find out all the resources which is not being tagged, and then you can take actions on those resources as well. Now, this is one thing. Now, if you do not want to use that and you want to go and take an action on a cost analysis, like, how do you want to make sure, like, I want to go in and then do some sort of like cost analysis, like, cost analysis also is inbuilt into like, Cloud Advisor. It contains a lot of these recommendations for you and all those things. You can certainly do here, like, budgets is also here. I'll jump into the Cloud Advisor in a minute, but you can also do the cost usage and reports, which, and you can also do that, like, these reports are available for example, you can download this report and analyze these reports and see that basically what is your burn rate, right? What are you spending on, which are the resources you're spending on, and all those things. Now, you can also schedule, these are the scheduled reporting as well. Like, if you can look at it, the scheduled reporting, you can create a scheduled report, like based on, like, your duration of it. Like, if you want to do it on, like, a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you can also schedule reports for you. Now, the other thing which I wanted to talk about it is like, is the Cloud Advisor. Okay. Now, one of the things the Cloud Advisor provides you is inbuilt is, like, you can see in the dashboard, like, I kept it for the last because I want to spend a lot of time on this, is like, you can see this, it's an inbuilt Cloud Advisor. It also provides you, how can you maximize the cost savings for you, right? The savings is very important in cloud because as I mentioned earlier, right? Cloud is not cheap, because as you start spinning up the resources, it is like a flywheel effort, right? You can start to burn a lot of money on the cloud without, even if you do not manage it well. Now, some of the things OCI provides you is manage the cloud budget very wisely and use it for what is intended for. Like, and that's where I think these recommendations comes into picture, right? If you can see here, like, there's a lot of recommendations for you. Like, for example, you might be spending something on which you're not even using it. Like, you created a compute instance, you attached a couple of, like, block volumes, boot volumes, so you didn't delete it. And then so the storage cost is like, a small drops of water makes an ocean, and it keeps on piling on the every monthly cost. It gives you, like, you delete the unattached, like, boot volumes, right? So if you can see that there's a lot of this, like, recommendations, which gives you can take actions on it. And even, like, for example, one of the things is enable object lifecycle management. in the object storage, one of the key things OCI provides you is you can manage the life cycle of the object where the data is there. If you are frequently using it, you can keep it in. If you do not use it frequently, you can archive it. So you can pay less for those resources. So those are the things which we can provide the recommendations, and you can take advantage of it and then save cost in the cloud. Let me ask you, Larry, based on your experience, Larry, which one is one of the things which you want to save money when using this, one of the tools which you think will help you to save money on it? Like, Cloud Advisor, or like, budgets, or, I talked about cost analysis as well.
I think it's a combination of all the above, to be honest, because it's something that it really comes down to which team is actually looking at it. From a building out the environment standpoint, I'm definitely going to be using tags, quota, budgets, and put those in place. But from a looking at what happened, and it's a matter of, is this a preemptive or post scenario? Like, are we predicting what's going to happen, or are we implementing guardrails and making sure that that's what happens? And so it comes down to, we're going to definitely implement tags at the beginning, so that when we look at the cost analysis, when we look at some of these recommendations, we're going to have a clearer picture of, oh, is this recommendation valuable for what we're trying to do? Or is this recommendation needed because we already know, okay, yeah, we do have some, unattached block volumes, but there's a reason we have those unattached block volumes, and maybe it's not necessary to implement what Cloud Advisor is actually stating. So it's just a matter of, these are all tools to really help maximize the capabilities of the account.
Thank you, Larry. That's a great answer. Thank you. With that, I'll stop, and I think we can open for Q&A. At least we are like 5 minutes from the top of the hour. I'll stop here. And I think, Larry, do you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen to close the last couple of slides?
Yeah, definitely. Let me make sure I'm on the correct slide. We talked about Cloud Advisor to kind of help optimize. So that's where we're at. And then we hopped into the console, looked at budgeting and reporting, and just some of the key takeaways as we look at this. If you're moving from on-prem to OCI, or if you're moving from other cloud vendors over to OCI, is something that you can take a look at. We have ways to put in budgets, we have ways to put in quota, and it is something that you can do, basically a 4-year projection of what you're trying to do or spend, and start putting those parameters in place. Because when you look at the budgeting, this is something that I can budget for a month and say, oh, we don't want to spend more than this for this month. And so you can start putting those in, seeing the trends. When you start looking at going from on-prem into OCI, this is where you also can look at, oh, I'm currently using how many CPU. And that's where you can start potentially downsizing some of the resources and making modifications. So compartments and taggings are definitely something that can be very beneficial as we do this. And this is something that it's just going to help. It's going to help from a budget standpoint. It's going to help from a policy management standpoint. It's, this goes into security. All of these things tie in together, and you want to make sure, hey, we have our compartments in place, we have our tagging structure in place, we know what's going on in the account. And a lot of times, once you start getting those pieces in place, I've worked with a lot of customers that actually don't go into the console whatsoever, aside from maybe the accounting team is looking in the console or getting reports. So there's a lot of different pieces to look at this. So just a final piece here, we have our compartment structure. It's a logical grouping of our resources. We're using Cloud Advisor so that we can see what's going on and get recommendations onto what's launched or what could be modified. And that helps us with a cost standpoint, a security standpoint. And then we have tags that are going to be associated maybe at the root compartment level or the top compartment for that, and then enforced to the lower compartments. And like I demonstrated, you can definitely retroactively add tags. It's just a matter of, if you want to do a bulk add, you would need the script. So that's kind of it for today. There are definitely some more resources on training, and we're going to have another training on another day one and beyond training coming up soon. With that said, I'm going to hand it back over to Renu. Anand, thanks for chatting with me today on this topic, because I think it's definitely a crucial topic.
Thank you, Larry. It was very informative as well. Thank you.
Awesome session. Thank you, both of you, Anand and Larry. Really appreciate your time and help for this session. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. And now it's time for 2 quick polls. Nick, if you can have the... Awesome. Thank you so much. So this is the first one. Let us know how we are doing. We need your feedback to continue improving our sessions. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this webinar to your colleagues and friends? Please remember that your feedback is really important for us. And followed by this, we have our second poll coming up. Yeah, if you take a moment to answer the second poll to let us know what kind of topics you are interested in. Based on your feedback, we select the topics for our upcoming session. So let us know. We'll give it a minute, maybe. And while you're doing that, I just wanted to let you know about our next session, which will be on March 7th. We're really excited. That's a new session that we have added based on your feedback. It's on observability and management. You can find the details on our Day 1 and Beyond page. I'll put the link here in chat for you, for those who don't have it handy. As soon as I can find the chat window, here it is. So I'm putting in 2 links here. One is for the Day 1 and Beyond page, and second one is the email address. If you have any questions that you would like us to answer for you, either you can send it directly to Larry. He already shared his email address in the Q&A panel, or you can send it to personaltrainers_us@oracle.com. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions there.
Definitely use the personal trainer one, because that one has a team that can respond to it. If you email me directly, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to get back to you.
Awesome. And with that, thank you again for joining us. See you all next time. Have a great day, everyone.